This is a painting by Mino Maccari of Gerarca, a prominent member of the fascist party. And Maccari was certainly very much a supporter of the regime throughout most of the 20s and the 30s, but clearly by the time he does this picture in 1942, he, like many people who up until then have been quite strong supporters of the regime and Mussolini, is aware that the regime is effectively on the way out. I think what's perhaps interesting here is that the focus is on the fascist party official. A lot of public anger is directed towards gerarchi, leading party officials, who are believed to have been hiding food, benefiting illegally from the war, doing far better than other people during the war. It was very much the language of anger towards what was seen as a corrupt party, towards the ladroni, the big robbers in the party, and a lot of attacks on the houses of gerarchi. In a way, I think what you could say Maccari is focusing on here is a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the regime, but that dissatisfaction focused primarily on the party, a party that is seen as corrupt, a party that is perhaps largely responsible for the disasters of the war. So the party, rather than specifically Mussolini, but clearly lurking in Maccari's mind, as the minds of many people who have supported the regime and supported Mussolini up until then, is a question of to what extent is Mussolini himself responsible for this total disaster that Italy has descended into. So Italy's war goes very badly wrong right from the start. And after defeat in North Africa at the end of 1942, beginning of 1943, it's clearly a matter of time before Italy itself is going to be invaded. Once the Allies, the British and Americans, have rolled back the German and Italian forces in Libya and Tunisia, then they're free to attack Italy. So pressure begins to mount on the king, Victor Emmanuel III, in July 1943 to remove Mussolini. But they're terrified, also the Germans. This is a great problem that Italy's got. The Germans are already in the Italian peninsula in some force. And of course, the king and his generals know that the faintest whiff of negotiations, British and Americans, for peace is going to have the Germans pouring reinforcements down over the Brenner Pass into Italy. And this is where it all goes horribly messy.
The Roman painter Mario Maffei is one of the most interesting artists that reworks the iconography of Mussolini. Something else that I think is very important is that Mario Maffei, as well as concentrating on the idea of the body and the ideal body of Mussolini and its demise, paints some of the most disturbing scenes ever painted at this time, of life in Italy under the Nazi occupation, and the violence, the extreme violence in many cases of the occupying troops, particularly against women, it must be said. And you can see that in some of these other scenes of interrogation, for instance, or this particular very telling depiction of the troops enjoying themselves, and they're clearly this is a rape scene, and it's one of the many very violent and really disturbing scenes. Maffei at this point in his career takes on board fully expressionism, and he uses that to create this very interesting texture on the canvases, as well as giving us a kind of visual and very powerful a representation of the body that is literally falling apart. It's the total opposite of the hard-shelled, lean machine-type body of which was so central to fascist ideology, and this is a body that now is, it's not just sort of fat and overabundant, but literally, almost, the texture itself is melting away.
When the announcement is made on the evening of the 5th of July that Mussolini's resigned, Badoglio has taken over as Prime Minister, the crowds pour out onto the streets. Extraordinary scenes of jubilation. And they hack down fascist insignia, pull down statues of Mussolini. Extraordinary scenes of jubilation, even though in the broadcast it said quite clearly the war continues.
And in Bologna, what they did, I mean, what the angry mob, what the angry people did in July 1943 was to go to the stadium and really pull down the statue. They managed to pull down the body and they detached the head from the body. They didn't manage to pull down the horse because it was too heavy, but they managed to pull down the body, and the body was left lying there. The head was dragged along the streets of Bologna. And then what happened was that, according to the sources that we have, which are quite nebulous, so I did a lot of research, spent a lot of time trying to reconstruct the history of this statue because it's so interesting and symbolic. The Germans took the body. The body was left there. It was moved to the gymnasia of the stadium. It stayed there for a few months, and then in January 1944, it's taken away. Of course, it was bronze, so it was very useful metal, so it was taken by the Germans. The horse stayed in its place here without the horseman for a period of time. And then, after the war, it was reclaimed, and this is sort of the interesting part of our story, it was reclaimed by the Association of Partisans. They wanted to build a monument to the resistance, and there was this horse there looking very sad. And of course the local authorities didn't want to restore it. There was a whole debate about whether this statue should be restored or not, also whether it had artistic value or not. So in the end, the local authorities in Bologna decided that the statue didn't have any artistic value whatsoever. So when the partisans reclaimed the bronze to make another statue, it was given to them. So they used the bronze to build two, and you have them here, two images of partisans.
The Germans pour their troops down into Italy. And then Mussolini himself, who had been arrested, as I said, on the 25th of July, 43, and he'd been shuttled around various places in captivity, ending up on the Gran Sasso mountain in a hotel, a luxurious hotel on the Gran Sasso mountain. He was rescued in later September 1943 by a German parachute division. No resistance put up, Mussolini just taken. And Mussolini was then installed at the head of basically a puppet government in northern Italy, with its base in the small town of Salò on Lake Garda, and became known as the Republic of Salò, or more officially the Italian Social Republic. Allies gradually fighting their way up, linking up more and more with partisan formations in northern Italy. And by the early spring of 45, it's clear the war's coming to an end. At this point, Mussolini and fellow fascists try to flee back to Germany. And Mussolini is captured by partisans, disguised as a German soldier, found hidden in a lorry. And on the 28th of April 1945, he and his long-standing mistress, Claretta Petacci, are shot near the town of Dongo, on the shores of Lake Como, by partisans. And the corpses were dumped on 29th of April in Piazzale Loreto, chosen deliberately because that had been the site of a massacre of partisans a few months earlier, in the late summer of '44, and the bodies of partisans being dumped symbolically in the hot sunshine in Piazza Loreto in, I think it was August '44. So here was revenge for that killing. Revenge is much the order of the day at this time.
Mussolini's final end made it onto postcards. When Mussolini was executed in April 1945 and his body brought back to Milan along with those of his lover and various of his final associates, it was a moment of collective catharsis for the Italians.
And that's the symbolic end, as well as the real end, in a sense, of fascism. And it's very sobering to look at that image and then to think that for well over 20 years, millions and millions of Italians had venerated Mussolini. And it says something about human beings. You can perhaps think what?